It's the age of the self-driving supply chain. What does that mean? We're going to find out in my conversation with Fred Laluyaux. He is president and CEO of Aera Technology. Fred, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I like this term, the self-driving supply chain, but I'm not entirely sure what it means. Would you explain what that term describes?
Yeah, if I may, I'll use the analogy of the car. If you think about a self-driving car, what did we do? We digitized the operating system of the car. What is the operating system of a car? The driver. And by digitizing the driver, we're coming up with a system that's real-time and always on, connected outside and in, thinking, learning, and autonomous, and its ability to actually make a decision and act on it. So then apply that analogy to the enterprise and to the supply chain. Imagine a cognitive operating system, a brain that sits on top of the transactional tools, and that's real-time and always on, thinking and learning, connected outside and in, and its ability to, and autonomous in its ability to make decisions and take actions.
Do you really mean to expand the metaphor of the self-driving car to the point where we're actually talking about taking humans out of the loop, the decision-making and analytical loop completely?
Okay, so a self-driving supply chain is a supply chain that is real-time and always on, connected outside and in, thinking, learning, and autonomous. And the way it works is the tool will, or the process will be to provide recommendations to the users that are very pragmatic. Augment or increase your forecast, move inventory. So the thinking that leads to that decision is done by the self-driving supply chain, and the user is involved in the approval or the objections to the recommendations that are made. The system can actually go full autonomy. In other words, it can actually crawl your transaction systems, understand the data, make decisions, and act on it autonomously.
Okay, there's two different things going on there as you described it. One is the user is involved and one is the user is not involved.
Correct.
So in some cases the metaphor cannot be expanded to say that the human is being taken completely out of the loop. On the other hand, you're saying there is the potential for that, for it to be completely autonomous. So which is it today?
It's a combination of both, really. In some cases, we see supply chain processes being completely autonomized, if I can use that word, where the system runs completely autonomously 24/7, and that's for fairly simple decisions that can be programmed in a way that doesn't require a human intervention. But in other cases, for more complex processes that require that human experience and expertise, then what the self-driving supply chain does is it digitizes the recommendations and goes in front of the users and asks for that user's input. I'll give you an example. One of the processes that we see getting digitized through the self-driving process is creating promotions. Right? So if you're a consumer packaged goods company, you are delivering promotions to the consumer to increase the sale of your product. Well, that process is fairly complex. You have to blend data coming from point of sales, you have to blend data coming from an array of sources, and then apply a lot of algorithms. But you also need that human touch to know that, no, it's not the right idea to do a promotion for this product in that period of time. So here we need to have the planners or the account managers who know intimately an account to interact with the intelligence in the system.
But what if the conclusion of the system is counterintuitive and yet correct? The human thinks it's not because the human doesn't understand the sophistication of the thinking. I hate to use that word for the machine. The sophistication of the process that the machine went through to come to that conclusion. The machine is right, but the human thinks it's wrong. What then?
So I'll go back to the self-driving car analogy because actually it works quite well. If your self-driving car system says switch lane now and then take that road versus that road, you as a human might say, no, I'm going to override that decision and put your hands back on the wheel and drive the way you want. At the end of the journey, the system will tell you, hey, the decision you made here actually cost you, 2 minutes. And the next time you'll go, okay, maybe I should learn from that system. In other cases, the human will be right, and then you'll say, well, I've overeaten, but then the system will actually learn from that recommendation and from that decision from the human. And the exact same thing apply to the self-driving supply chains. We'll come to the operators with recommendations. They have the ability to override them. They have the ability to accept them or reject them. If they reject them, we'll ask them, what is the reason code? So that the system can actually learn from that human interaction and over time provide more accurate recommendations.
Can the system explain its reasoning? Again,
Yes.
I hate to use that word.
Yeah.
Or is it a black box where the recommendation comes out and you don't really know how it came to that conclusion?
So it has to be a glass box, not a black box. I know I'm using marketing jargon here, but literally, if you cannot explain why you're making a recommendation, then the recommendation is going to be ignored. So for the system to work, it has to be real time, right? That's how you augment the humans. We as humans are not really good at being real time and always on. So the system has to be real time and always on. The system has to think. It's been programmed by the humans to think, so it can explain what it's recommending, but it also has to learn from the humans. It's a true collaboration. We're digitizing the decision-making process for normalized, processes, but the interactions with the human is there all the time.
How important is it for the system to provide different possibilities, what-if scenarios, and then allow the human to choose from among them based on these so-called simulations of potential actions?
So the supply chain is a combination of short-range all the way to long-term planning decisions. And every time you look at long-term plans, the human's ability to do what if and test and try some hypothesis is increases. But when you're talking about short-term optimization, how do I ship or how do I move inventory from one place to the other, it might be actually fully digitized because the human brain doesn't have the time to actually process. So it had very little value. It becomes a volume game. So the further the range, the more human what-if capability, the shorter the range, the more automation. That's how we see it.
As two things happen within the system. One is the system learns.
Yeah.
The other is, this isn't a system thing, but the other is that the people come to trust the system when they realize that the system is more often right than wrong.
Yes.
Does this mean that in the future the percentage of actual decisions and actions dictated by the machine become greater and the actions necessary actions by the humans become fewer?
Yes. That's what it means.
Uh-huh.
But it also means that the humans will have more time to spend on more strategic decisions where they don't have, or human-to-human interactions. Mm-hmm. If you talk to users of this technology, they will say, well, we as humans in a network or on our own are asked to basically operate like computers. We're asked to decide and decipher a large amount of data, compute, collaborate. All of this can actually be automated. And that's where you'll see an increase in the number of decisions and recommendations that are made by the computers, and the computer systems. But when it comes to long-term decision, back to my previous point, when it comes to complex decisions that impact, people, that's when you see less of automation and more augmentation.
And do you think for the foreseeable future that is the way it will be?
It is happening already.
Yeah,
it's already
But I mean, in
started.
terms of still some element of human required in the process, or do you see a future whereby it is a truly autonomous supply chain that makes its own decisions based on the input and output?
So the way I look at it, it's no different than what happened in the shop floor in the last 50 years. We went from people doing the work supported by machines today to the work being done by machines controlled by people. I think the people aspect in terms of controlling, in terms of directing the machines, in that case they are algorithms, not physical machines, but it's the same thing, that role is always going to be there.
Yeah. And it seems, though, that what we're talking about here, the autonomous or so-called self-driving supply chain, may arrive before the literal self-driving car does, because it sounds like it's more feasible, actually,
We
at
drew
this level.
We drew an analogy with the five level of autonomy in self-driving cars, right? We drew the analogy with the supply chain. Today we're getting some level 4, which means hands-off, processes.
Right.
Our clients call that touchless. There are multiple words for it, but literally the system running autonomously, the human controlling, that's already a reality. I think we're going to be at that level for a long time. I think the true intelligent supply chain that's going to take a while before it's really a reality.
Well, Fred, thanks so much for explaining to me at last just what the self-driving supply chain is and the very promising future for realizing it. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I have been speaking with Fred Laluyaux of Aera Technology. Thank you so much for watching.